this computer. Okay, guys, so today what we wanted to talk about was just how to deal with patients that come into the door when they don't have those mechanical issues, and maybe there's something else that's going on, whether it's emotional or whether it is something that's more like autoimmune type related. And I know a few of you guys could not make it, and I know I'm getting some questions up while I'm looking on my phone so I can have them in front of me. But we had some fantastic questions, so we're going to address a lot of those questions. But let's just kind of start first on how we feel pain. So typically, you know, in the PT world, we feel pain in 3 different ways. We talk about this all the time. We feel pain mechanically, and that's like, you know, how we move, how our joints move, how our muscles work, just like how our body operates overall. Those are the mechanics of everything. And then you feel pain chemically, which is like you have an injury, you get swelling. It has that constant throbbing, achy type pain. And that's when chemicals can address chemicals. And then we also have pain that comes from thermal. So thermal pain would be like burns and sunburns. So those are the 3 common ways that we can kind of distinguish, categorize people and figure out like what's going on and how we can kind of get to the source of the problem. But there's other categories out there that I've, you know, seen. And a lot of this comes from my own experience of things that I've dealt with in this healthcare society, in the healthcare world, and how I've been able to bring that into my practice. And those are like autoimmune type related diseases that happen that can create pain and a whole sorts of a lot of, you know, different things. We'll talk about that. And then we also have emotional pain, like that chronic stress from like the emotional side of things that also can create pain. And we'll get into some examples of that. So typically when you come in and you see a patient, we don't really know what's going on. We literally are just sitting down having a conversation. And when we first start having these conversations and asking questions, we are really kind of figuring out like, okay, where is the source coming from? Is this really something that's going to be more mechanical? Is there something that's going to be more chemical? You know, how can we best help them? And so when you first start moving people, almost always you're going to find, okay, we found like, I'm going to give an example. We found like, okay, in the neck, we can tell that it's not moving to the right very well, but it's moving to the left. Maybe there's some thoracic issues. This is creating some like random, you know, pain that's happening that we typically would see, you know, between the shoulder blades. But we start addressing those things and it's not making a difference. The pain is still there. There's no patterns with the pain whatsoever, but everything else is improving. Like their range has improved. There's just literally like, you know, their strength looks good. We've worked on this. We've worked on their function, how the whole body moves, but the pain is still there and it has not changed. And so this is when you start making sure that first of all, you're ruling out any kind of red flags, potentially make sure that there's nothing going on there. So we definitely want to make sure that we do those kind of things. But this is when I have those kind of situations, this is when I start going into like diet type stuff. So if they are someone that is an athlete, let's say they grew up very similar. I grew up playing soccer, you know, I was a competitive gymnast, got into marathons. And so like, I literally like exercise my body to death. When they're an athlete, then I start asking them more questions around that, like around their lifestyle. Like, you know, are they noticing that they're crashing at the end of the day, that they're just really tired? That their workouts, their recovery is not very good. You know, I'll ask if they're having any stomach issues. I'll ask, you know, all these different kinds of questions to get an understanding from them. And then sometimes I kind of get into my story a little bit of like how I like, you know, how my body completely like fell apart in my late 20s. How I literally like in a 3.5 period of time was just catching everything under the sun. I had bronchitis, I had pneumonia, I had cancer. And I dealt with like this virus that just kept on like, you know, like attacking me. And that's what it did for me. But I was completely exhausted, crashing at the end of the day, having to take naps, like having a hard time even working out because my recoveries were horrible. And so when you start asking people some of those questions, you start filling in the gaps. And that's when I started asking, like, has anyone ever talked to you about like diets? or anything, like, how nutrition might be able to help with some of the things that are going on, because we've addressed everything mechanically. There's nothing mechanical going on. So that's when I go into more of like autoimmune type stuff. And typically they'll have like pain that has no pattern. They could have like numbness. These are some things that I've seen in the past. But they can't change their position to make it better and worse. Those are questions that I ask, because that will show me that it's mechanical. It's just there all the time, and there's nothing that they can do to kind of change it. So we're going to hear a story later on of a person that that I helped with this very same thing, and how we started trying to like work with their diet, and how typically these people, when they go get testing, they'll get testing, all this testing under the sun, and everything will come back negative. So I'm almost the point of like, when I tell people, go get the testing, it's totally fine. I go, but it's going to come back negative. And usually when it does, they're like, how did you know? And I'm like, because I've seen it before. I've seen it time and time again. They test everything under the sun and they cannot find anything wrong. And this is when you also get the patients that are completely frustrated. They feel like they're made to feel like something is wrong with them. I've even had patients being sent to like psychiatry because they are made to feel like they're crazy. And I'm like, you're not crazy. I know something's wrong. Your body's just out of balance. And so when that happens, in my office, I use a product called Juice Plus. It's basically fruits and vegetables in a capsule. And I just at least start getting them to where they can start flooding their body. I like it for several reasons. One, it's just food. It has research on it, but it's pre-digestive. So anytime you have issues within your stomach, which is where our immune system lies, the majority of it, essentially, whether it's revved up and you have autoimmune type conditions, or it's revved down and you catch everything underneath the sun. That's how I was. Mine was like, I caught everything underneath the sun, including cancer, because mine was lowered. But when you have autoimmune conditions, it's hot, it's revved up. And so your body like misfires all the time, and we need to get it back into balance. And when you try to eat like really like healthy foods, for the most part, you start moving to a plant-based diet. Sometimes it doesn't quite work, because when you actually chew the food and you eat it and it goes down into your stomach, that's when the nutrition gets out of it. But your stomach, how I call it, has like gunk. That's what I kind of call it. So like nothing really gets out. So you don't really get absorption from all the good nutrition from the fruits and vegetables. But when you can take something that's pre-digestive, or do things that are like smoothies or juicing, or things that are, the food is already broken down, it gets into the bloodstream immediately, it starts working on the outside end. And when you can start doing that consistently over time, they're going to start noticing changes. And when they start noticing changes, and they're open to like doing more changes, and then I can kind of throw them into our community that we have here, where they can get more recipe ideas. We can start, looking at other things, like making sure that they're getting enough water. Like we have other programs that we can kind of put them through. So if it's really minor, that usually works. That usually be like, oh my God, I cannot believe how much better I feel. And that's just what we do. Now, if you don't have anything set up like that, that's no big deal. That's when you start looking for people that you can start referring people out to, that might be able to help them. And the big thing is being able to recognize it, and then being able to help them get to someone that might be able to help them. And so that's where you have to kind of start looking for some of those people. We already have things in place for people that we can get help from. So when you have people from the diet perspective that starts having issues like, I can't even eat healthy foods, then that is a whole nother ballgame. Like literally, when they can't eat things like quinoa, and they can't eat green leafy vegetables, typically it's like the green leafy vegetables. Sometimes you'll have common things like, it'll be like some of the hardier grains that are out there. They can't tolerate it. Like they literally feel sick when they eat those foods. And that's when you know that their diet is so bad that they're not, that they've really got to get help. And they've got to get help not from like a medical community, because they don't understand how to deal with this. That's when you have to find a really good like naturopath, someone that's been through school, like medical school for this. There's about 3 that are out there in the United States. And I have someone that I send people to in North Carolina, someone that I've been to before. And he puts you through like a 6-month program, but it takes about 3 months before you start noticing things. And by 6 months, you literally start feeling so much better. Like when I get people that that go and see him, I get text messages saying like, thank you, my life is starting to come back again. Like I never thought I could get there. And really, as a physical therapist, I mean, we really, I mean, in my view, I feel like we're almost better at being like a primary care physician, because we can spend time with people. Like we're seeing people for an hour, you know, multiple times a week sometimes, or, you know, once a week or whatever, where we can actually spend time and kind of start figuring things out. So we're going to do a better job than going into a doctor's office and they see him for like 5 minutes and they diagnose him, and they just basically want to put him on like some, like, here's a test. Okay, now let's put you on the medication based off what this test does. Well, that doesn't really help, because we have to get to the source of what's going on. So when you look at it from an autoimmune condition, that's the route that I typically take. And we'll have a story here later on of someone again that we helped out here recently. So there's let's go to the emotional side of things. So when we have people that that have just a lot of stress in their life, and that presents different than someone that has that needs help, like kind of with their diet. So typically, and I'll kind of give you an example of a patient, but typically when you start noticing that there's an emotional component, what you will see is when you go into your evaluation, you start figuring things out. Okay, this is getting better. This is getting better. They will get better, and they will start feeling better, and their function will start feeling better. And then all of a sudden they'll come in and they'll say, like, I don't understand. I'm just not getting any better. Like I still hurt. But they're able to do the stairs when they couldn't do the stairs. They're able to do things functionally better, but they still hurt. And so when you start seeing that, where their objective measures are improving, their function really is improving, they're doing things that they couldn't do before, but then all of a sudden they're just not getting better. The pain is still there. That's when I start going like, what else has happened? Like, tell me a little bit more. Is there anything else going on in your life? And all of a sudden you'll start hearing, well, oh my gosh, it is so stressful at work, and this week has been the worst. And I'm like, oh, there we go. There we go. Because when you have something that's like really stressful in your life, like it has to be a major event, or something that's been accumulating over time, and then it's like, this is the last straw. The stress is going to hit your weakest link. So just like if you get sick, it's going to hit your weakest link. If you had back pain, you get sick, you're going to have like way more back pain. Same thing with this. Like if you have a really big emotional thing that's happening, it's going to affect your weakest link. And if your weakest link is something orthopedic, then that's what it is going to affect. And so then you have to kind of get into some of those things. Now, you've got to determine whether is the stress that they're having, is this something that's kind of a short-term thing, or is this something that's going to be, that's a long-term thing, and they're completely different. It's okay for us to have stress. We have to, like, in order for us to improve in any part of our life, we have to have stress in our body. Just like if you're going to go and work out and you're doing a weight that's heavier than you normally would do, you're stressing your muscles, you're stressing your joints, and you have to, in order for growth in that muscle to happen, or in order for our bones to get stronger. But if you overload it and the body can't take it, then it will overstress, and that's when we have injuries. Well, the same is true with stress, with any kind of stressful event. Like you're going to do something new for the first time that you've never done before, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's stress in there, but then you overcome it, and then you're better, and you're growing when you do things like that, like personally, from a mindset perspective, from a personal perspective. But when you have something that's like a major like stress, and it's just chronically hitting you, or there's something going on that's like that really affected your life, whether it's like you know, someone important to you dying or things like that, and trying to overcome it, that becomes where it's kind of like that chronic stress. And that's when you can have a lot of problems. And again, whatever the stressful event is happening, whatever is going, it's going to hit your weakest link, whether that's something that is physical or something that is something else, like that it hits your body in a different way. I also have had experience with this because my dad passed away. And when that happened, I couldn't stop working, and I had the stress of trying to figure out how to take care of my mom and how to process all of this, because my dad I talked to my dad every single day, and my body crashed. And now it didn't hit me orthopedic wise, but it did hit me hormonally wise. and my body completely crashed. And again, I had the experience of going to the doctors, and they were like, well, how old are you? And I was like, well, I'm like, 39. Oh, that's just what happens when you get older. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like that, like I just told you my whole story. Like I was fine. My dad died. They didn't even listen. And I basically just waited for some time to figure out what I was going to do to get to this, because my body, like I didn't know where to start. And that's when I found Dr. Mike Smith, who's a naturopath, and he kind of helped me through a few things. But I also kept on having other stressful events at my PT office, which is why I pulled out of it, with just having to do more and more and more and more, and my body just crashing because I never could fully like heal from my dad. So it was, needless to say, my body was a complete mess, but I learned a lot from it. And this is how, like, if you have, something that is, oh, my work is just really stressful right now, but in 2 months it's going to change, that's going to be a completely different situation than something that's been like really chronic. So let me go through the short-term one first. I'll give you kind of an example of a patient that we saw recently. She came in with like knee pain, tried everything. Nothing worked because everyone just looked at their knee as the problem. They never actually went and tried to figure it all out. And so they'd been giving her strengthening things. It wasn't going to work. She couldn't even get the muscles to kind of fire. And so what we found was that she was having some hip issues where her hip wasn't moving very well. Obviously, if her hip's not moving very well, then her hip muscles aren't going to be able to fire very well, which affects the knee. So we had to go and do some like hip mobilization stretches. We got her hip moving better. And then we started doing like just general easy table exercises. And then we started being able to do more strengthening that was happening, like more functional strengthening. And her leg was so weak, but at that point she could feel her muscles and we could see her progress. And she was progressing and she was feeling really good. And then all of a sudden she wasn't. But she was like that kind of same scenario where she's like, I'm like, so can you do your stairs? She goes, yeah, I can go up and down stairs. I don't have problems. I can do like we went through everything to figure out like she actually was functionally better. Her baselines, everything from her strength to her range of motion to her joint to like everything was better. But all of a sudden, like she wasn't better. And I asked her, tell me a little bit more what's going on. Like, is there anything that's different? And she literally said, well, at work, we're under a lot of stress because we have to meet this deadline. And we've had, because of COVID, we had to let people go. And the whole area is a mess for this audit. So it is super stressful right now. I'm like, interesting. And that was something that had just happened. I'm like, I'd be curious. Like, I'm pretty sure that's where some of this is coming from. Because look at all these things that are improving. We need to address this. And she literally was going on vacation. I said, I'll be interested to see like what happens. And she got back from vacation and we got a message from her and she said, you're right. Pain felt fantastic. It is the stress. And so you can see like when you just ask some different questions to kind of figure out, you'll see how some of these things are really more from a stress related incidents. And you can start talking to people about that. And I always tell people, you've got to get to the source of the problem. If you don't get to the source, you're just treating a symptom. And we do so much of that in the healthcare community. And so if you can kind of talk people through this, at least it brings awareness around it and they have a better understanding. And that's going to, again, build trust. But when we go back to kind of my incidents where I actually had an incident, like from my dad's death to the office being like a mess. I literally would wake up on Sunday. I couldn't get sleep on Sunday. I never slept on Sunday because I never wanted to go into work because I was that stressed and it was that horrific. And once when I got there, I was fine because I loved treating the patients, but everything else that I had to do, like my body was just completely falling apart. So when I worked with a doctor, everything I was improving overall, but I couldn't get that last like 15%. And this is kind of what I found was, well, I had to just get away from that situation because that situation was really like the trigger. Like if I wasn't going to get away from it, it's like stabbing a wound and being like, I don't understand why I'm not getting better. And literally me getting out of that situation with like me stabbing the wound. So I had to get out of the situation. I did, and it allowed my body to kind of heal. And I actually took a course, a Brene Brown course on Brave Leadership. And she talked about how, especially with women, how we would get like overwhelmed. Overwhelm is a common thing. And I was like, oh my God, that's me. I'm like so overwhelmed. So much so that if anyone put anything on my plate, like if my husband said, we're going to go to dinner on Saturday with friends, I would freak out because I'm like, oh my God, I got to prepare. Like, I don't know. I'm like that could be the only thing on my schedule. I was like that freaked out. I couldn't, I had to put nothing on my schedule on the weekends in order to function during the week. So one of the things that she said is when you have this word that like takes us, whatever it is, that my word was overwhelm, when you feel that, you'll actually get a physical sign. And so that physical sign could be anything. That could be like pain that you feel in your leg. Or for me, it was, I could feel literally like my body, I could feel my stomach hurts when I started feeling overwhelmed. And then I felt like from my toes up that my body would get like super hot all the way up. Like that was my physical sign. She says, there's a physical sign, you always can feel it. And that physical sign, when it happens, you're going to hear it loop in your head. And I was like, okay, let me go and see. I'm like, oh, here it happens. And I literally, my loop was, oh my God, here it goes again, here it goes again, here it goes again. And, about like being overwhelmed. And then she said, you have to ask yourself, is it true? And I had to like rewire my brain, because essentially how I describe it is when you have like an incident, whether it's, it could be something in your childhood and that could be creating this, but you have an incident, and it's like if you go and you hear a song, it takes you right back to that place and time. You can visualize the movie at that point in time when that song comes on, and you might not have seen that movie in 10 years. That's essentially what happens, is whatever that emotion that you're feeling, when you feel it, it's taking you right back to that time and place, and you have to kind of rewire your brain in order to not experience that anymore. So I literally would tell myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta, it's not true. Like I have all day to get this done. And literally I did that over and over and over again, and I rewired my brain. So essentially it was cognitive behavior therapy. And if you have someone, like we have a person that was actually a patient, and we can send people to her because she deals with pain. She deals with people to help them get out of pain from a cognitive way, but that's essentially cognitive behavior therapy. So I'll tell people, I'll ask them like, when, can you tell when this happens? Is there a physical sign where you can feel when this happens? And they usually can say yes. And I'm like, okay, so then listen for the loop that's in your head. And when you hear that loop, then you just got to tell yourself, is it true? And then you have to like rewire it. But that's essentially when someone has like that chronic kind of pain, then that's where you have to like address it in that way. But if it's not kind of a short-term stuff, then you just allow them, that you bring awareness around it in people's lives, that's what's going on. And when you are done with that, whatever activity, like the audit is over, then you know that they're going to like kind of decompress and they're not going to have to worry about it. So there's two ways that you can really handle something like this. When I talk to people from either a stressful event or like an autoimmune type event, how I like to describe it is like an overuse injury. So if you are over, like, let's take, you're a runner and you're overdoing it and your body can't recover from what you're doing, you can have a stress fracture. And it's purely done from like a stressful, like from you doing it to your body. And so it's not from like a fall or anything like that. So essentially, same thing with the stress, same thing with autoimmune type stuff is that you've been stressing the body in a way that the body can't take it anymore, and it's overdoing it, and then it's going to create a problem. And this is how I explain it to patients. And so if you have a stress fracture and you overdo it, like you have someone coming in and you boot them, they're fine, they feel better, they start walking, they feel fine, they walk too far and they start hurting. Like there's too much stress that it's going to create that bone to hurt again. Same kind of thing happens with the body. So if you have like emotional stuff, it's a gradual process, because it took you a long time to get to this point. It's going to take you some time to get out of this place. Just like with a stress fracture, it's not like, bone, heal 6 weeks, get back to activity, and you're good. No, you created the stress fracture because of something that you did over a long period of time. So if you go too fast, you're going to notice your symptoms. Just like with a stress fracture, if you go and you start running, you're going to notice your symptoms. And it has to be a gradual progression of doing things and introducing things into your body or taking things away and then being able to bring them back in gradually. Because if you do something that the body doesn't like, as you start figuring the body out, then your body's going to react. And you might get away with it one time, and then all of a sudden the next time you're like, oh, I can't do that. I feel like crap. And that's how I really explain it to patients. I explain it like a stress fracture. Ben, do you have any questions?
No, not so far. I think I got a good handle on it. And one of the big things I always try to do is like if they're, if they're kind of showing that kind of centrally mediated pain is I'll talk to them a little bit about what how the neurological process of that goes, and maybe why their body has practiced that so much that they're like good at it, and we need to practice not being in pain for a little bit. And usually that's if I can give them something to modify their symptoms or change up what they're doing throughout their day, just something to break that cycle up is
Yeah.
people.
And I find the biggest difference between like something that's autoimmune and something that is more emotional is on the emotional side of things, you're going to see their mechanics improve, and you're going to see them improving with their mechanics. And then, but they'll be doing stuff that will create their pain again, but it will be, there'll be a pattern with it. You'll see a pattern with it, even with them, like with their emotional stuff. When it's autoimmune, there's no patterns. Like literally, like everything, like they move fine. They, we have the strength is there. Like they're like we cannot recreate their pain at all. Like, but they're still having the symptoms, and there's no rhyme or reason, and they can't change their position or do anything to change it. That's when I start going into like, okay, there's this. We've got to look at diet. And that's really kind of how I distinguish between the two, because you can start asking more and more questions and learning a little bit more and leading you down into that path. And literally, I find that there's two people with that autoimmune type stuff. You have the athletes, and theirs are a little bit different. They don't always have stomach issues, but I know that they've abused their body and they haven't done enough to build it up. And usually when they start getting into like upper 20s, lower 30s, they can start having some issues if they just have not stopped. And so you usually can kind of tell with them and learning a little bit more about them on like, are you crashing at the end of the day? It's common. Like when you start asking them these like exhausted, like you have to come home and take naps before going out to dinner with your friends. Maybe your allergies are horrific or are getting better. You're getting sick all the time. Like you'll start noticing patterns like that with people. And if you start sharing your story, they're like, oh my God, yeah, that sounds like me. Where if they weren't really an athlete, that's when I start asking more questions about like, do you have any stomach issues? Is there anything going on that's creating some of the symptoms? And they'll start telling you, yeah, like I have stomach issues all the time. Like I can't even eat certain foods because I know that I'll be in so much pain. And I'm like, there we go. We got to start cleaning. We got to start cleaning this up. And I thought I'd have Jamie on today to share a story. She should be coming on here and this like around 1 o'clock. And I know it's like just after, but she's probably finished up with a patient. If she doesn't come on here in the next few minutes, I'll share her story because it was a journey and it was a long journey. But when I saw her, she had back pain originally, and she found me because I was a diploma in McKinsey, and she wanted someone to really sit down and figure this out. And she called me and one other person that was in Fort Worth, and I responded back to her, and I saw her. And so we went and she had back pain and, but had numbness down both of her legs. I was like, well, that's really interesting. And she did have like mechanical issues, like her back pain resolved, 2-3 visits that resolved, but her numbness in her legs never went away at all. And she I was like, well, let's try this, like let's, try to get some deep tissue massage. But at the same time, I'd have been asking her some other questions about like what, what else has been going on. Like she had moved from like New Jersey to here because she was, oh, there we are. We can hear her story. Hey, Jamie.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. The point, because I wanted them to hear your story.
Yeah.
Of when we first started. I was kind of telling them that you came in for like saw you for back pain. You're having issues.
Hold on, Steph, sorry. Let me get my
Okay.
headphones. You can go ahead. You can go ahead and tell my story.
And you're getting numbness down both your legs. And we found issues with the back, but that resolved really fairly quickly, but you're still getting the numbness down your legs. And then I think I was asking you questions about just your life in general. You had like moved here because you were trying to like, it was very stressful and you're trying to just change your environment type thing. And I can't remember when I shared my story because I was like, oh, I think this is going, like, I think you're very similar to me with my story.
I think it was the first day I met you, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I think the first day I met you, you just straight out said, "How's your digestion?"
Yeah.
And it went from there pretty much. But then I did see you, I think, one more time as a therapist, and you were, and then you did say because my numbness started spreading, to everywhere, and then you did say like, go get that MRI that you're hoping for, and that came back completely clean.
Yeah.
So that's when we kind of changed gears there.
Yeah. And I know I shared with you my story because I was like, does this resonate with you? Because of just, me being super active and my body completely falling apart and being like exhausted and not being able to recover, like, and having a lot of hormonal issues and things like that. And I remember you had called me like maybe 2 or 3 days later and you're like, how did you know that about me? Like, I've been trying to figure out what was wrong for so many years or whatever, and you just nailed it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And then I know you wanted to get other testing stuff. I'm like, it's your diets and we need to change this and you need to move to a plant-based diet, and starting all these things. And I know you went and got a whole slew of testing. What kind of tests did you do? And I knew that after the MRI was negative, everything else is going to be negative as well.
Yeah. So I think it's really interesting because my story is very similar to a lot of people's story. Yeah. So Stephanie planted the seed about nutrition, but I spent the next 2 years trying to figure out what was going on. I went through the traditional medicine approach. MS was like the biggest one on the table for me. I got that. I went to, I think in total during that time, I saw 4 neurologists, at least 3 orthos. I saw a rheumatologist, primary care, of course. And I got all of this testing done. And I actually did end up getting a diagnosis I got a diagnosis about a year ago. And I was diagnosed with something called small fiber neuropathy, where they took a skin biopsy and they showed that the density in my skin was severely lost. So below my knees, I have 80% of my small nerves are gone. So that is your type C and A deltas. So I have a couple things batting against me with that. One, and I can talk about that in a minute, but one of the issues that I was having was that they could not tell me why that happened or what caused it. So, I went everywhere from like, you know, I've had a chiropractor tell me like, if you have an instability in your neck, it can like, I don't know, like decrease blood flow to it and this and that. And I'm like, from my PT mind, you know, that does sound semi-plausible. Okay, let's explore that. Believe it or not, the only thing that started getting me better was a combination of working with a naturopathic doctor who he can't diagnose something where there's no like inflammatory markers. There's none of that. But he diagnosed me with something
like that typically.
Yeah, he diagnosed me with something under
negative.
Mm-hmm. So he said that I have an immune system dysfunction, and I fall under that umbrella. The other thing that I didn't mention, besides the neurological symptoms that I was having, was severe gastrointestinal issues. I don't think I had a solid bowel movement for years. So, you know, that right there kind of, you don't think about it because it's separate. But so I've been working with a naturopathic doctor for about 1.5 years, and I got my life back. I stopped going to the chiropractor, and I got better through diet. And I did hit a wall at one point. And the thing about what I have is that your small nerve fibers and your A delta fibers, they also go to your digestive tract. So that's kind of batting against me too. I might have like a digestive system flare up from something I ate, or it can just be because it's just a day where my nerves are acting up. You know, there is this up and down battle. But once I got the bulk of the things under control, the condition became significantly more manageable. But I hit a wall with that as well. And that wall was figuring out, what is stress doing to my body as well? And I would honestly say at this point, stress is 50%, if not more, of the battle. 50, like significantly, to the point where like I know my signs and symptoms. If I'm feeling like my tongue starts to tingle, and not like an anxious type of tingle, like my neuropathies. If I feel like my legs are tingling or burning, like I'll get it in my groin, I'll get it everywhere. If I start to feel like my body is tensing, I stop and think, what am I thinking right now? And I'll take deep breaths, and it just goes away. Yeah. It is the most craziest thing. I can't make it up. It is consistent, and it has given me control over my life. I didn't work out for like almost 2 years, and I was a Division I basketball player. That's not really in my genetic makeup to just be stagnant, and it was horrible, which adds to the stress. So that's kind of my story. I had lost all my hair. It's like grown back now. I gained a bunch of weight. I lost all that again. Like my skin is clear. My mood is better. I sleep good. Like I just got my life back. I can't even express it. And I'm definitely a typical person who I fought for myself. Everything that I'm telling you was not easy day in and day out. But my situation would have turned into that typical patient who's just on lifelong medicine, on lifelong steroids, on lifelong immunosuppressants. I would have been on gabapentin my whole life, or Lyrica, until they came out with something new. I would have just been on medicine and never getting to the root of any of the problems. And it's been 1.5 years now, and I can say I have days where I'm 90%, and I still have days where I'm 50% better. But I know how to manage that, and that's just, you know, it's gonna take. I still believe I'm gonna heal from this, but I do believe that I'm always gonna have to manage it.
Yeah, I can remember. So you came to my grand opening, and I remember you telling me like that, you know, you went down the diet path, and you can't even eat some of the good. You can't even go plant-based. You can't even eat some of the good foods. And I'm like, yeah, because you are so far gone. Like, and that's when I think I must have told you at that point, like, I have a doctor that I can send you to. So when you get to that point, then just let me know. And then I remember you calling me up asking for that doctor.
Yeah, you told me about Dr. Smith like the first month I met you, actually.
Oh, did I? Okay, good.
You planted the seed 2 years. It took me 2 years to do it. Yeah. But
well,
the
it's a
person who
journey.
needs, yeah, it's a journey. It
It's a
is
journey.
for sure a journey. And you know what helped me the most make that decision was camaraderie. And when you feel like nobody around you understands what's going on, and you find someone, if you have a patient who has all these symptoms, connect him with another patient that you have all those symptoms.
Yeah.
Like that is something that is extremely comforting for somebody to move forward. And Stephanie put me in touch with a patient of hers that had similar things going on. And she saw the doctor that I ended up seeing. And it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. And I hadn't even talked to Dr. Smith yet. I just knew I was going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that goes down to like really, getting down to the source of the problem. And there's layers, just like with our patients, when we see people like just, I had an example of someone that had knee pain, and it's like you're peeling back layers and layers and layers of things. And as you peel back one layer, then other things happen. And you also had the emotional component, which I've been through. I know we've had these conversations before too, about how you will know what your symptoms are. Like as soon as you feel that, whatever it is, overwhelm or whatever it is, whatever the word it is for you that creates that stress, you're going to have that physical sign, and then you're going to hear that loop inside of you. And then you're going to be like, this is stupid. Like, I'm okay. Like, I'm not in a fight or flight type situation. And you can, like, as you do it, you can turn it off like that, just like how you're saying. And then eventually, as you're able to turn it off, you're going to notice that it's going to get longer and longer and longer. And eventually you're not even going to notice it, because I've seen it. I've done it before. And I equate it to almost like that we talked about earlier, like that overuse type injury, that when you have, a stress fracture, you stressed your body to get to that point. And if you have something that's stressing your body and it's not quite ready, you're going to notice your symptoms. And then as your body starts healing, it's going to take a lot more for you to be stressed before you're going to notice your symptoms. And the longer that you allow your body to heal to where you're not like stressing it in those ways, but you're just gradually stressing it so that it can take more, then you're going to have complete healing, just like you would with a stress fracture. And that's true for an autoimmune condition with foods that we can't eat. And it's also true for stress when it's been there for a long time.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. I completely agree. It's a journey. It's a journey, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
No, it makes you a better person. Just like anything that's like anything that you have to overcome, and you start overcoming it. It's a part of who you are, and then now you can almost. It's like, for me and all the things that I went through, it's how I made my practice the way I made it, because of all my experiences and everything that I've done. And I feel like I'm very blessed that it happened when I was young, because it's going to be a lot easier for my body to heal. And I'm going to have like many more years that are going to be fantastic. Where if it would have happened when you're older, it takes a lot longer for you to kind of overcome these things. But literally, you just take your experiences and you can bring it into patient care, and it just makes your treatments that much better.
Yeah. And be kind to your bodies, everyone. Be kind to your bodies. Our job is it's not something you can do for a long period of time. Just be kind to your bodies. Do what makes you right. If you're working for a company that's making you see 25 patients a day, maybe it's time to rethink that.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. I'm going to stop the recording, but we can get into anything that you want to ask.